welcome back to BLOCKTV. I'm Ron Friedman, and it's time for HODL with HODL, a chance to zoom out for a moment and take a wider perspective on some of the heady issues that dominate the crypto markets as a whole, especially this week and especially today. To guide us through this journey of discovery, we're joined by Bitcoin influencer and thought leader Dan Held. He's the Director of Business Development at Kraken. Hey, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, like I started last couple of days, a bit rough when talking about Bitcoin market, but we wanted to take it back to the roots and the name of this show, HODL with HODL, and I guess the tweet that started it off?
Yeah, well, I've always been a really big Bitcoin believer ever since 2012. I came into this industry because I felt that Bitcoin represented our best chance at freedom for humanity. And that started, when in 2012 I started to play around with Bitcoin and started to see the, true immutability of the protocol and the hard to seize nature of the asset. I think that was kind of my aha moment. And, there was a couple different cycles that I've been through, and we've got the screenshot up of my tweet from 2015.
Right. So yeah, the market direction looks familiar. The prices, one could only wish.
Yeah, the price is around $200 at the bottom of that chart. And so I tweeted out at the bottom of the last 2015 bear market, HODL. HODLing is the rallying cry for Bitcoin believers. It represents that. I think it represents something much deeper than just the word HODL. It represents a commitment. It represents a belief in something despite everyone else telling you that you're wrong. You believe in that because you hold certain principles to be true. And so, a lot of people right now, I feel, are very fearful of the price action with Bitcoin, where it dropped down to like 7,300. And I tweeted this out yesterday to remind people
Right.
how far we've come. And my last name being Held, which is actually my last name. Not a lot of people know that. They think that the name is actually just a parody, but my last name is Held. And so HODL with HODL really does represent, I do feel kind of a responsibility to kind of preach about HODLing, or at least educate people about HODLing and why it's important. And I think this is a fun way to look back in time and see how this isn't some new trend. I've felt this way for a very long time.
No, absolutely, and your commitment is to be commended. But let's talk a bit about that philosophy. I mean, hold on for dear life. But even that, and you're holding on for a purpose. Are you waiting for a return to all-time highs? Are you waiting for the mass adoption moment, or is it blank HODL forever? Leave the bitcoins to the next generations.
That's a great question. Certainly, no one has a time preference of 0. We all have a limited lifespan, and eventually we have to spend that money, invest, or do something with that money, or store value in it. So, if you do, HODLing is an investment philosophy you can carry over into other types of investments. What's funny is that I used to work at Uber, and I had a few buddies over from Uber the other weekend for some beers, and we were catching up, and a lot of them were considering selling their shares at the very bottom.
Right.
A lot of them, Uber's price, I think, has dipped around 20 to 30% since the IPO. And they're going, maybe I should just cut my losses. Maybe I should sell this. And they don't have conviction in the trade. This is only 1 year in. And I think HODLing, what it teaches you is that, one is whenever you enter an investment, choose at what price will you exit. Certainly there's going to be some small amount of Bitcoin that I sell to buy X, Y, or Z because I'm a human being. I have to have home, I have to have food, etc. And I think with any other investment, you look at Uber and you look at the fundamentals, or you look at Uber and you look at the bullish case for Uber, and you go, I'm going to take that risk by buying Uber shares. I think it's undervalued because in year 10 from now, it's going to be, making X amount of money. So I think it's a life philosophy to apply to all investing. Have a thesis when you go in, have an exit price when you go in, and believe in it. Things are assets are accurately priced in the short term, but very mispriced in the long term. As we saw with my old chart with Bitcoin's price from 2015, I'm sure we would all like to build a time traveling machine so we could go back and buy as much Bitcoin as we
Yeah,
could.
man, some
Yeah,
2020 hindsight there. But again, for people who were in the space, I guess today's prices would have been imaginary.
hey, maybe in a few years, under 10,000 will seem like a pretty great price too.
Right. But let's look a bit closer at what's happening now. Yesterday's dip, 8% in minutes. Any theories as to why we saw that? I mean, we've heard some things thrown around, everything from Mark Zuckerberg testifying on Libra to market manipulation, as is it's always floated as a theory, to just technicals that came together to produce that result. What's your take?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like if a butterfly flaps its wings, does that cause hurricanes on the other side of the world? Uh, no one knows exactly what happened yesterday. For the new investor out there or the existing investor, I would take any narrative with a grain of salt. Human beings want to understand the past, and what we like to do is we'd like to craft narratives to make the world make sense.
Right.
So there's a lot of different competing narratives for why the market went up or went down yesterday. Yesterday it went down. Um, I think it's kind of fun to think about which narratives might have moved it. I don't think the Zuckerberg testimony really moved the market much. That was sort of prescribed by Bloomberg,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think there's any data to suggest that actually moved it. It seemed like it started on MEX or BitMEX where there was a series of liquidations. So, um, I think this is classic. It's part of the classic cycle. If we look at the other previous runs up before the halving event, we've got kind of some sideways chop, which we've had for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of funny. There are Bitcoin memes that say, it shows a guy with a stick poking the
Yeah,
Bitcoin
poking the
logo.
stick. Sure, we know that one.
Yeah,
Do
exactly.
something.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, Bitcoin is a very volatile asset, and this is sort of to be expected. I think everyone was kind of waiting for something to happen, and he was either going to break up or break down really sharply. And right now, I think there's kind of overall bearish sentiment. I think people are getting a little bit bored. People are like, "Hey, I want my moon bucks." People kind of yearn for 2017 again, and so yeah, I just think it's part of the natural cycle of less people being less interested in Bitcoin, and this applies to all other crypto assets too.
For sure.
Less interested in Bitcoin and just kind of lower volume and some sideways chop here before the halving.
Yeah, we were speaking to an analyst previously, and they track sentiment data on Twitter, and that's another chart that's going down. But let's veer off a second. So yesterday, like we said, Zuckerberg, Facebook CEO, testifying in Congress in the House of Representatives Financial Committee there. On one hand, it's bringing digital assets. We're not going to call Libra a crypto, but digital assets into the mainstream. 6 hours of grilling, tons of people. It was broadcast on major networks, and tons of people tuned in. Arguably, most of the discussion didn't even have to do with Libra itself or digital assets in general. It was an opportunity for politicians to take to the stage in prime time, or with the peak viewership, and kind of talk about their pet peeves or complaints with Facebook. Many of them justified, but at the end of the day. One message that did come out is that Libra looks like it's going to go ahead, but Mark Zuckerberg is saying only if they get regulatory approval in the U.S. And we actually have a clip of one of those exchanges. We'll play it, and then let's hear what you think.
You also noted in your testimony today that you're going to be looking for U.S. regulatory approval in terms of AML, BSA, to be able to make sure that Facebook, for its part, within the association, will continue to participate. If the Libra Association can't satisfy those regulations with the U.S. regulations are in place, will Calibra pull out of the association?
Congressman, the short answer would be yes. If we don't come up with a solution that gets the U.S. regulatory approval, then presumably we'll continue working on the proposal until we can, but we're not going to launch anything that doesn't have U.S. regulatory approval.
So the wallet portion of this you would pull out?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
You would pull out on the wallet portion of this with the Calibra?
The case that I was referring to before where we might be required to pull out is if the association independently decides to move forward on something that we're not comfortable with. But right now, I think my understanding is that everyone is aligned on making sure that we have U.S. regulatory approval to launch anywhere in the world, and that's the goal and that's the plan.
So Zuckerberg, they're talking about things that they'd be comfortable with. What do you think? I mean, is that regulation necessary for an asset like Libra to go forward? And if it does, what does that say about the digital asset space in general?
Well, I think Libra here is serving an important function of being a punching bag for the cryptocurrency market as a whole. They're taking a lot of flack, a lot of it being more directed at Facebook, but this is a good time to highlight exactly why Bitcoin is valuable. There is no CEO of Bitcoin to haul up in front of Congress. Satoshi intentionally did that to where Bitcoin could operate and stand on its own with no central point of failure. Again, here we highlight how there is a central Android robot in the name of Mark Zuckerberg that Facebook has to put on TV to talk about and grovel for permission from different regulators. Right. So one is that, this again highlights the difference between a decentralized currency and a centralized one. Two, I don't know how long that's going to take to get every single bureaucrat to check off on their list, hey, I'm totally satisfied here. We have to remember that bureaucrats who are, by the way, not elected, have no financial incentive to approve any new sort of technology. For example, with I fly drones for fun, and there's no financial incentive for the FAA to issue drone regulation in a quick and efficient manner, and so there's a wide swath of drone companies that perished because of that. Simply because the FAA would get a lot of criticism if there was a crash, and they're not going to get a bonus if there's 100,000 drones flying over the air, delivering tens of billions of dollars of economic good. So I think, again, this kind of highlights that with Libra, that, if you wait on regulatory approval, you're going to have to wait a really long time. And, with Uber was illegal in every single city it launched in. So I think that's important to highlight the difference of kind of culturally in the fintech sector versus the like ride sharing and other sort of tech sectors when it comes to regulatory compliance.
Interesting, apt comparison there. So again, it's going to be a waiting game with Libra. We'll see if Zuckerberg, the man stands up to what he said. Also worth noting that there's the caveat there that formally Libra Association isn't part of Facebook. Facebook is a member on it. So there's always that kind of loophole that Libra is doing, and it's not us. So we'll see where that goes. Another talking point here with you today. So we're looking ahead. San Francisco Blockchain Week coming up on the 28th of October. San Francisco, Silicon Valley being a big hub for blockchain and cryptocurrencies. What do you know about this conference? Are you going to be taking part? Are you going to be checking it out?
Yeah, good question. So I think San Francisco is the hub of a lot of different conferences that go down. This is, I think, another sort of let's see how many crypto conferences we can jam into 1 week and events we can put together. But I think overall there's going to be a lot of people in town. In business development, that's where I find the most value, is being able to connect with people that live in other cities that I don't get to see very often or not as much. So A lot of people will be in town next week, a lot of very kind of intimate gatherings post-conference, whether that be dinners, happy hours, and little kind of mini panels or conference, mini hour meetups. Right. So I'm looking forward to having everyone in town. I think San Francisco, of course, is the tech hub of the world. And this is kind of yet another conference that highlights that. I've traveled to many, many different conferences in my time in the crypto space. So it's kind of hard for them to be super differentiated after this much time.
All right. It's also going to be interesting maybe to get a feel of kind of the pulse of or the sentiment going around crypto and blockchain businesses, whether this doom and gloom that seems to be taking over sticks, or whether it's something that when you're meeting face to face and you're seeing actual development going on, actual companies that are working, kind of clear the air on that a bit.
Yeah, well, on the next episode of HODLing with HODL, we'll kind of dive in on some of my findings at SF Blockchain, where you can see kind of what the sentiment is, and if there's any sort of new buzz that people are talking about, if there's any new technology or any new products that people are really into. I'm always excited to see entrepreneurs come out and pitch their startup. My first crypto startup, Zero Block, which was bought by blockchain.com, we pitched that. I remember distinctly, I pitched that at the San Jose Bitcoin conference, and I cold pitched people in person. So I like to, I really respect the hustle that different entrepreneurs have, especially when they're building something really useful. And so I'm always excited to meet new entrepreneurs in this space.
Right. And we'll hear all about it on the next installment. And I guess some good news to end off with, some breaking news coming out. Bakkt just announced that they're adding a new product. So on December 9th, they're going to be rolling out Bitcoin options in addition to the physically backed futures that they rolled out, I guess it's already 5 or 6 weeks ago. So another potential on-ramp for institutional investors, for that's as much as regulation, we might dismiss it, but in this case we are talking about a regulated exchange here. You think that's a good development, good for Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. A healthy options market enables us to better price Bitcoin, and it enables whether it be companies or miners to better manage their risk. So right now, miners, when they mine, they've got a lot of different risks going on operationally, and they're not able to hedge the price very well. So a healthy options market is totally needed in Bitcoin. To the best of my knowledge, LedgerX is the only one that is pretty active right now. So I'm excited to see more and more competition come into this space, and work around, like, whether it be options, futures, derivatives, sort of other different financial instruments outside of spot trading. So, I'm excited to see these develop and become healthy. I think overall this would be good for Bitcoin. So I don't think Bitcoiners should be afraid right now. A lot of Bitcoiners, they don't like some of the more complicated financial instruments that Wall Street brings, but this is necessary for a healthy functioning market. So options are, I would say objectively a great thing for Bitcoin right now.
Excellent. So ending on a positive note, and like you said, don't forget where we started off this segment. HODL on. Daniel, thanks very much. As usual, a pleasure. We'll see you again very soon. In the meantime, our viewers, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more blockchain and cryptocurrency news.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.